Hello and welcome to Don the Fossilbuster. As you can probably see, I'm living in a beautiful part of Australia, hence the hat. Now I have to explain first of all, the hat is not a decoration. It is a necessity in Australia. Both in the summer, it's very hot, you need to protect your head from the sun, and in the winter it is quite cold in Adelaide, so you also need it. So I'm not just wearing it for decoration, it's necessary. Anyway, here we go. This video is aimed really for learners of English who are struggling, and you may be thinking of moving to an English-speaking country, maybe Australia, maybe the UK or the USA or New Zealand, but it's aimed for you, and I'm trying to actually address an issue which I think many of the other talking heads, and there are many of them, very good ones they are too, some of them, but I think there are some issues that they are not addressing, and I'm addressing the issue of fossil mistakes. Fossils. Well, do you know what a fossil is? Yes, I'm sure you do. Most of you will know that a fossil is a dead animal. An animal that died many millions of years ago and was then buried by a lot of earth, and which became rock. Dinosaurs are examples of fossils. Now, what's that got to do with language teaching and learning? A lot, actually. Because you actually have got, as a learner, many errors and mistakes in your brain, buried in your brain, very, very deeply, just like a fossil. And these are mistakes that are not your fault. You've picked them up from your learning environments, mainly schools or textbooks and so on. So they are still very serious errors which can block communication and really decrease the speed at which you learn. Now, a little bit more about me first, after the fossils. Anyway, what I want to do is find those fossils for you and then help you fix them. Find them and fix them. First of all, yes, I am from Ireland originally. You'll notice the accent is not quite Australian, but I've lived in Australia for a long, long time. But I've spent most of my life actually overseas in about 10 countries, living as a teacher of English mostly. So I have a lot of experience there. And also, I should say, I know what you're facing. I think I have got this experience of learning a second language myself. I taught myself Spanish. I started at the age of 32, and by the age of 36, I was fluent in speaking. So, yes, I know the problems that you face as an adult learner. And something else about me, I like to tell stories. And most of the stories that I tell are true stories. I think they're the best ones. I just have to admit, though, that some stories perhaps should never be told. Now, back to the fossils again. And so what I mean by a fossil is a language mistake or a false belief about language learning that you have acquired, you have learned as a child growing up. And these fossils, yeah, they're difficult to find. That's where I can help you. I can help you find those fossils, and I can then help you fix them. So let me give you some examples. For example, if you take the word live, let's start with pronunciation, because pronunciation is the easiest way to start. I think everybody's interested in it, and everybody knows about it. So if you take the word live and leave, this is a common pronunciation error, and it's quite simple. In some people's languages, they don't have the E sound. In Russian, for example, the long E And in some languages, they don't have the I sound, which is the short E we have in English. Now, we have both in English. But in some languages, for example, Spanish, they don't have the short I. So what happens is that when someone wants to say the word live, they may actually say leave. Or another speaker may say leave when they want to say live. And of course, they have completely opposite meanings. If I say to a student, where do you want to live? Well, then the student say, I want to leave Australia. Well, that has the opposite meaning. It means he wants to get out and go away. That's not what he means. He means he wants to stay in Australia. So it can have quite serious consequences. Native speakers won't understand you if you're making a mistake with this vowel. I'll give you a few more examples of these pronunciation fossils. Do you say, for example, instead of saying this, like this towel, do you say this towel? Or instead of that, do you say that? Or, for example, stress error, do you say record instead of record? Or do you say chop instead of shop? Or do you say lunchy instead of lunch? Okay, they're small mistakes. Of course they're small mistakes. And actually only one mistake like that is not going to make a problem for most people, most native speakers. Although in the case of my friend, it did make a problem. But most of those pronunciation errors are not going to make a lot of problems for you on their own. But put together, if you have, let's say in 30 seconds of speech, if you have 15 or 20 of them, which you may well have, those little fossilized pronunciation errors, then you've got a problem in communication. Then your listener is going to get tired. Then your listener is going to make an excuse to end the conversation and leave you and talk to somebody else. So that's where it's a problem. So the problem is there are many of these fossils. Another one is phone, for example, instead of phone, as in telephone or mobile phone. People will say phone. The same mistake is, instead of saying no, which is the long O, which we say, which is actually a diphthong, people will say no, no. So yeah, those are examples that you probably know. Some of them can be quite funny. I once had a student who came to me and she said that she had been to McDonald's and asked for a large cock and chips. And she couldn't understand why the counter boys laughed and asked for her phone number. Well, the thing is, she should have said Coke, which is the long O or diphthong, and as in Coca-Cola. And a cock, of course, is the slang for the male sexual organ. So, as I said, perhaps some stories should never be told. But fresh stories are very good ones, and I get them, you know, every so often I get really funny, fresh stories and not so funny ones. And then the other thing I need to say is that really, in this video, it's not just about pronunciation. That's only the start. It's mainly about your learning habits, attitudes to study, attitudes to learning. For example, how many of you have a problem finishing your reading tests on time? Well, of course, this may well be because you are reading every single word. And of course, that is not a good way to read. There's a better way to read than do that. It's too slow. Now, what happens is you may actually fix the error temporarily. A teacher will say to you, hey, it's towel, as I said to my friend. It's not tower. I had just done that lesson with him a few days before he had the story problem with his native speaker. So he listened to me and he said, oh, thank you. Yes, thanks, Don. I understand now. And I showed him how to make the L sound instead of the R sound. But a few days later, he'd gone back to his old way of saying tower. He'd forgotten. So you do have to do something to fix these fossils. That's the problem. It's not just a question of getting me to identify them. Then you have to do something, and I'll explain what it is in these videos. It's not difficult. It does take a little bit of time and a little bit of work. But let me tell you another story. First of all, a fresh story. And this involved a current student of mine, very good student from Eastern Europe. And we were traveling along in the car together. He was driving and I was the passenger. And so we were having a great conversation about something. And then suddenly I noticed his face went very serious and he stopped talking. And I thought, oh, something wrong. And then he said, I want to see my will. I want to see my will. And he repeated it a couple of times. I was a bit, concerned. I couldn't understand why he would want to see his will. Because a will is a piece of paper which you write just before you die, which you say, I leave all my money to my wife or my children, and I give my house to my wife and my children. A will? Why would he want to see his will? I couldn't understand it. And I thought, does he mean will in the future? No, it didn't make sense. Anyway, he kept repeating it. Then the car slowed down, and I said, what do you mean by will? And he got out of the car and he looked down, and then I understood. He meant wheel. Wheel. The long E, the wheel of the car. He could hear a noise in it. That was the problem. So we started laughing. But anyway, that's a fresh story. It gives you an example of just how you can get misunderstandings with a small difference like that. Now, again, the problem was that we had done this in class 3 or 4 days before this happened. I'd explained about E and E, and he'd said, oh, thank you, Don, for that, yes. And I said, well, now here you have to do it. And I gave him a few exercises to do and a program, a little plan to do things. But he didn't do it. He hadn't started it. So it's a fossil, and it came back after a few days. Now, the point of these videos is to give you a few tips on how to fix these fossils. And by the way, you can't learn pronunciation by studying it. You have to actually learn to produce the sounds, listen and learn the sounds. Yeah. So anyway, that's a fossil itself. So if you join me in this series of videos, I'll help you to remove these fossils. And in the next video, I've got a lot of fossils to show you. I'll go through many different ones, not just pronunciation ones, but learning ones, mistaken beliefs that you have about learning. So please join me. If you've liked this video, please do like it, and I'll see you next time. Bye for now. Please leave your comments on this video. If you want to contact me, you'll find my address in the description below.